Welcome back to Timo's Dinky Detailing. Today I'm going to be restoring a Dinky 154 Hillman Minx Saloon. This one came with a lot that had many toys that had been very well played with to the point of being repainted multiple times and thrown back into the toy box. So this has got lots of layers of different paint and it's all been chipped off. There are remnants of the original paint color, so I'm going to extract those. So you can see a lot of colors of paint. The base is rusty, but looks in decent shape, and mostly the casting looks good. So the first step, as usual, is to remove the base, and so I go in with my 3/8 drill. This is a brilliant drill that has a split point, so it stays on center. It doesn't wander around, so I don't need to use a center drill to pre-drill this thing to keep it on center. It'll stay where you started. So I'm doing it by hand because this is a great drill. I got this from my son's friend's grandfather passed away, and there was a lot of stuff that he had, and he had some really good quality tools, and that's one of them. So the base comes off. It's pretty bent up. It's covered in rust, and my fingers are covered in rust now. And so start with the axles. I'm going to take the hubs off, and my usual thing is to go to my 6-inch Nicholson file. I recommend, if you're going to get a file, get a good one. This is a name brand. And while you're at it, remember to like, share, and subscribe. It is free, so I'm not going to charge you anything if you do it. And also remember, it's liking is a thumbs up, and I like to get those. They don't really have any effect, except they make me feel good. So the file I'm using here has the one edge ground off, so when I'm filing up against a hub like this, it doesn't cut into the hub at all. It's just a shiny piece of metal, and it doesn't damage the hub. So got those off. My fingers are all messed up from the rust on this thing, and it's bent up quite a bit. So I go to my parallel pliers, and these are pliers if you haven't watched before. I've ground down the teeth off of the pliers, and I use this for doing this fine sheet metal work. It's just brilliant. This pliers are made in the UK somewhere, but I don't know if you can still get them. But anyway, I enjoy using these, and I don't know what I would do without them. So here's a lot of it's a lot bent up a huge amount, so it's a lot of little fiddly work to try and get it to be as straight as possible. I get the thing pretty straight, and so hopefully that'll be good enough. It's under the model, so when it's finished you don't see it, so it doesn't need to be absolutely perfect, but I need it to fit in here. Now here's a problem. It's sticking out the front, and it's not matching up with the rear mounting holes. So this was bent up, and there's this 90 degrees bend that I'm going to have to fix. But first, I'm going to put this in Evapo Rust. This is the super safe rust remover, and put it aside for a little while. So now some time has passed, and we take it out, and all the rust has come off of it, and it starts looking pretty good. The axles were in there as well. And you can see there's just the bare metal left. There's no more rust on it, and the metal is pretty damaged. It's pitted quite a bit, but it's on the bottom of the toy. I'm not going to worry too much. The axles also have the rust removed, and brush it up a little bit with a brass brush, and it'll be just fine. You can see a little bit of the pitting, and that's gonna be in the final thing. There's nothing I can do about that. Now to get this thing to fit on the bottom, I've got to adjust this double 90-degree corner, and so I figured out I can put a parallel clamp on here, and if I strike it with a hammer, it's going to close up both those 90-degree angles. So let's have a look. It looks like it's working. So I'm going to move the clamp over a little bit and get the rest of that joint. So that's the first time I've used a parallel clamp for that, and it came out beautiful. So let's test it out on the model, and now the whole thing fits. The front end fits and the back holes match up to the studs. So now the problem is the whole casting is spread out too far, so the base kind of slips past there. There's little, so you can see that little curve right beside where I'm moving it with the parallel pliers, and that holds the base from sliding into the casting. So I needed to, that spread out over the years, and so I had to bend that a little bit closer. So the base is ready, and on goes the hardware store semi-gloss black paint, which always works so beautifully. And here I do the other side. You can see I've got a pad on the back with a bit of folded paper towel and then a sheet of baking paper, because that paint actually was the next day. But anyway, that paint wasn't completely hardened, so the baking paper makes sure that it doesn't slip or stick, sorry. So now into the milling machine, and I set up with the center drill. I align it first, put a little bit of cutting oil, and go in with the drill. I'm speeding this up, but actually I go with the drill with several passes, and I put a little bit more cutting oil each time, because this stuff is very chewy, and if I try to go too fast, it's gonna build up on the drill and break it off inside the casting. So the tap drill holes are done. So I get my taps and my tap handle, and time to put a thread in these holes. So again, same cutting fluid that I'm using, and I use my Osborne Blue Wizard tap. This is a machine tap. It has a spiral point, and it pushes the swarf in front of it. It's designed for through holes, but these ones are deep enough that the swarf goes in. Some of it I blow out with the air can. I probably should get the tap that has the opposite helix so that the swarf comes back out of the hole. But I don't have that tap, so I'm using what I have. So this is the same tap with the point ground off of it, so it goes deeper into the holes. Just the one of them needed that. The other ones I drilled the holes deeper, so just the ordinary tap, taper tap, drilled a deep enough hole so that we can put a screw in each one of those. So now to these axles. This one, obviously, it's bent quite a bit. And this one, last one's straight, so this one's all right. So to fix this one, the best way is to hit it with the hammer. And it doesn't take a lot of taps to get it straight. These axles are quite soft, really, and that's maybe why they bend into, you know, harsh play, but they're also easy to straighten out, which is a good thing. Now the ends of these, I'm using a new technique. I'm going to show you how I do it. What I do is I file the end flat, because what I'm doing is I'm trying to make it so that I can hammer the end more easily, because I'm spending a lot of time hammering hundreds of taps to get this thing to make a mushroom, and I'm just barely getting a mushroom out of it, just enough so that the wheel won't fall off. So I've taken these ones, and I've got a little, this is a little brass adapter. It's not fancy. I cut those slots so that it will compress in my lathe. I cut those with a cut-off tool and a Dremel tool. So it doesn't look pretty, but it holds my axle on center in the lathe. And I go in with the center drill just a tiny, tiny bit. And I'll show you what that looks like. So now there's a little dimple in the end of the axle. So I'll pull it out of there. And you can see. So that little dimple, when I hammer, I'm going to move the outer edge into a mushroom, and I just hammer until the dimple disappears, and I have a really nice mushroom. So here's the base. It's dried. You can see the pitting. The paint hasn't hidden it that much. So here we're going to match paint. Before I strip this thing, I'm going to match the colors. You can see the colors. The original colors are where the paint that was done over top has come off, and it's that tan color. And you can see that because it's on the inside of the model, and it's also here where it's chipped off. So that's the original color. It's a two-tone model. So there's also the green, which you can see. So I'm matching first the light color, and I've shortened up this sequence because this took like an hour, and then another hour to get the green. So I mixed in my leveling thinner and mixed it up, and then I peeled the label off so I know that it's my mixed paint and not the yellow. I'm using these jars because sometimes I'm mixing the paint and I got a lot of work, and several days later I got to come back to the paint. So I use my old empty jars and clean them up, and I use them to hold my colors. So I'm matching this green now. So this green is it's like the one I have there is way too bright, so I have to make it more of an olive color, and that involves putting yellow into the green. And then I switched over to an empty jar because you can see the green one has all kinds of crusted green on it, so it's going to be easier for me to mix in the empty jar, which is clean. And I wound up putting a lot of yellow paint, and then too much, so I had to put some brown. And then finally I got it to match exactly that original color. So once again, the Mr. Hobby leveling thinner. Everybody's using this because you spray the paint on and it doesn't dry quite as fast as ordinary thinner, and that allows the paint to level and it becomes more shiny. So there's my two colors that match the colors that were originally on the model. So now it's going to be time to strip the paint off now that I've matched it perfectly. And I'm using this piece of sheet metal that I've used on other models. This is my new way of doing it so that I don't have to grab onto the clamps I'm using. They're not good at grabbing those posts, and this way that's thinner material, so it holds it better. So boiling water, I'm outside now in the dark because it's winter now, and caustic soda, a little bit more. And I'm surprised by the caustic soda. It does take a while. I have to wait for it to clean the paint off. So there's the hubs and there's the body. I'm going to have to go for a couple more minutes. So that's got it all off. And the hubs. So I go in with the brass brush. Now I brush these by hand, and maybe I should do a little bit more. And when the casting is bad, then I'll go in with the spot and glaze putty. So here I go. I've got to brush the hubs as well because I want them to look shiny when it's all done. So now, this is the spot and glaze putty that I'm talking about. I've gone in and I found where there's flaws in the casting. And I put the spot and glaze putty and then sand it down till it's smooth. I'm trying to get out some of the casting lines. I think on this one I probably could have spent more time getting rid of casting lines, but I didn't, so you're going to see the way it is. Now this is the casting lines I did spend some time on the bonnet or hood. At the front, the Dinky often had these casting lines, and it kind of took away from the design of the actual car, and it looked like it was part of the car, but it isn't. So best thing is to take those casting lines off for sure. So painting the hubs with some Tamiya white fine surface primer, which is the best primer for these things. And I've got a new fan in my spray booth, which is good because I won't get the lung full of those toxic chemicals. So that's the other side of those hubs. See, this is the problem with that block, is you got to paint one side of the hub and then paint the other. So here you can see there's a huge dent in the back window of the model. I didn't even notice it until I'd painted it with primer. So I go in with the hammer I built in school and tap it out on the vise. That's the only way I could think to do it, and I suppose I could fill it with putty, but it's better if I actually make the metal back to its original shape. So then I also got to clean out the casting from the back window and file it all smooth. So of course that's spoiling my paint job, so put some more primer on there and now it looks pretty again. So now it's time to paint my color onto it. So into the airbrush, and back to the spray booth. So I start with the hubs because I want them to dry a little bit before I flip them over. So I'm painting first the inside of the hubs. That won't be seen because when I flip them I could damage them, so I paint the outside part later. So now I don't need to paint the entire body. This is going to be a two-tone model, so I'm just trying to get the bonnet and the roof, the top of the model basically, because the other part of the model is going to be a different color. It's going to be that green. On the other hand, you got to paint enough so that you don't miss a part, so that when you paint the green on there, you see there's a part that the paint is too thin. So the hubs are done, and now I got to tape the model up. This is a painstaking process. I've speeded it up a bit, but I want to make sure when I'm doing it that I get the line exactly in the right place. I'm using, this is Nito or whatever. It's Japanese tape that's like it's like electrical tape, only it's white and it doesn't leave any residue behind. And this is brilliant because you can move it around corners, and it also gives you a really clean edge to where the paint two different paint colors match. Got to press it down with a toothpick, and I spend a lot of time doing that because if you don't do it, it can spoil the finish. So now I've taped up the rest of it, and now we go to the second of the two-tone paints, which is the green. Back to the spray booth, and I put first light layers, so I'm not going to show you the whole thing because it takes a long time. I put light layers so that the paint dries at the tape joint, so it doesn't have a chance when I go to put the wet layer on that's shiny, it doesn't seep underneath the tape. So the moment of truth, of course, is always peeling off the tape. This is like an hour after I painted it, so the paint is still wet, so I have to be really careful. So you can see I've put paper towel and I covered it with other tape. You can't just leave the paper towel because the new paint will soak right through the paper towel and spoil your finish. So here's the actual tape line. And I've gotten good at this. I'm getting it pretty much perfect every time. So that came out absolutely perfectly. So I'll go in with my Micro Mesh 6000. There's some high points on it, and all I'm doing is I'm taking the high points off of the paint, and I don't need to paint it again. I don't want to go too deep that I take off paint where there's detail, like those ridges that show where the doors are. So I have to be careful. I'm just taking off the high points, and then I'm going to go with the clear lacquer coating. These hobby paints are very soft, but the clear lacquer is much harder, and so I go on with the clear lacquer to give it a nice clean finish. Also put the clear lacquer onto the hubs. So now I've got these are O-rings that I'm using as tires, and I've ordered these on Amazon, and they're just O-rings, but they're exactly the right size to match the original Dinky tires. Of course, it's very inexpensive for me to get these, and they look absolutely perfect. So all of these models that have the smooth tires, they get these O-rings because they look beautiful. So now you can see my dimpled shaft of the axle, and then I put my vice grips that have a special curve ground into the jaws, and then onto the vise, and I've got aluminum jaws on there so that it doesn't damage the other mushroom at the other end. Now normally I would spend a half an hour hammering these things, but it's much faster with that dimple I'm doing is those little walls. They mushroom out beautifully, and they do it quite quickly. So here's the one that's not attached to the base. This is just the axle with the two wheels. So I speeded it up, I cut out part of it, but you can see there's no dimple in the middle anymore, and now I'm just going moving around to make it more mushroom shaped. You can't see the dimple at all. It's much faster and much better than the way I used to do it. So now for detailing this one, I'm using the Molotov Chrome marker pen, and I take the ink out of the marker pen and go on with a brush because it gives me more control. So these are the headlights. My technique is to use the silver first, and then later on I will make the glass part of the headlight white, so it looks like, and in the end it looks like there's a trim ring holding the light bulb in, and then there's the glass part which is painted white, so it looks like it's on, and I think it's a terrific effect. I really like it, so I try to do it on all my models now. Some models it's more difficult, but many of them have, right in the casting, there's actually the trim ring in the casting. So these models, just the very edge of the bumper was painted, so I'm kind of reproducing that. It's a little bit easier to paint too, to try and paint into that inside corner. It doesn't always come out the best. Now I'm using my nail polish painting brush. This is brilliant. It's the tiniest little brush, but for these details, that's the only way to get them. And I'm using this one. It's like a ball. This one's a kind of elongated ball to get the filler cap. And it's a dot painter, designed to, you know, you're designing fingernails. Sometimes you have lines and dots. This brush is for making lines. I have longer ones, but I don't use them much. I use the smallest one most of the time. And then the other end they have a ball for painting dots. So here I'm doing some extra detailing that Dinky would never have done. The door handles, hinges. Here's the license plate or the number plate light. There's no tail lights on this model because there's nothing in the casting. The tail lights are rectangular, so I'm not even going to try and paint them, so I'll just leave it without. Got the hood ornament. So time to put the base on. The wheels in the front, put the base in, and put in my 440 button head cap screws. One more piece of detailing, actually two more. So the second last bit of detailing, I'm going to put a number plate on here. I don't have any white ink that I can print onto my own decal, so I have to put white decal underneath, and then I put my number plate printed onto clear decal, what do you call it, or slide decal paper. And because the numbers are clear, this way behind them there will be white. So then I've got to align the number plate onto the white background. So got it straight and it looks fine. So last bit of detailing is to put the white headlights so that the headlights look like they're on. I can't make a perfect circle just brushing it on, but fortunately you don't notice much difference between the white and the chrome, so usually it comes out okay. So just to remind you where we started, so this is a toy that's been well played with, so it's been loved, so it's got good energy, and let's see what it looks like now. So that's a huge difference. This is much more what it would have looked like when the child first got it at some Christmas or birthday present. It has fantastic energy, makes you feel good just looking at this thing. This is what the child would have gotten minus the license plate on the back, or number plate, sorry. But it's a beautiful toy. I always fall in love with each of these castings as I restore it from its very poor condition into something that looks like some child would be just thrilled to get. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Timo's Dinky Detailing. Until next time, be seeing you.